Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Sunday Night Live as I pull my chair in a wee bit, so I'm a little bit closer. Hope everybody's doing well. For some reason, even though it is very cold here, I mean, it's not like super winter yet, but it's certainly colder than it has been. I'm still wearing a short sleeve shirt, don't ask. Hope everyone's doing good. Thanks for that, Thomas. Looks like Hawks and Wings should be getting underway. Cool. Hopefully that'll be a good game. Hopefully Hawks will beat the Wings. Doubt it, but you never know. Crazier things have happened. So for those of you that really don't know me that well, I've been an avid ice hockey fan for many years. In fact, I follow quite a few American sports, actually. Basketball, ice hockey, baseball, and occasionally I'll watch the weird game that you guys play, where everyone wears pads and helmets, and it kind of looks like rugby, but it kind of stops every few seconds for about 5 minutes. And then it goes again for another few seconds, then it stops. Not sure what that game's called now. But anyway, I'm kidding. I'm a bit of an American sports fan. Chicago Cubs baseball and Blackhawks ice hockey. Those are kind of like the two main teams that I follow and the two main games that I watch, but it's quite hard to get them over here in the UK. But when I get to see them, it's great. Anyway, I hope everybody's doing well. We got about 13 people here. At one point we had 19. I was just like, great, that's a great way to start the show. We've got like nearly 20 people here, but no, it's a very tiny crowd tonight. Not quite sure why we're so low on numbers tonight, but anyway, a small crowd means you guys have got more questions, surely. If not, it's going to be a record short show. They stop for commercials. I know they stop for commercials, but it is. Yeah, American football is entertaining. I used to play a little bit. When I was at college, we had some American sports that we played when I was at college here in the UK. So it was fun until I got sat on, and then it was no longer fun. It's funny. Somehow being sat on playing American football was no fun, whereas being sat on playing rugby union was lots of fun. I didn't mind that, but anyway. Alright, so let's see who we got here tonight, and then we'll get into your questions. Thomas was first in the door. He was a whole hour early. Thomas, that is super duper diligence. Billy Morgan was about 20 minutes behind that, and then Rich Cresswell, one of my newer moderators, who is super duper awesome. And Ken Moss, who is also super duper awesome, is here. Kyle is here. Ironweed Studios. Mike at Music to Motion is here. Tony Stringer is here, which is awesome. Dwayne is here as well, which is great to have you here. Kevin from Kevin's Guitar Stories is here as well. Let's see, who else do we have? Ronald Figura is here. I'm just scrolling down to see who is here, but there's been plenty of chat. Oh, Peter Brooks is here. In fact, Peter Brooks has the first question, so we'll get to that in just a minute. Low Ends is here, which is awesome. Good to see you, buddy. John Hawk is here as well. And looks like Boston won that game, 3-4. Awesome. Predators 3-0 against the Wild. Looks like it could be a shutout against the Wild. That looks like it's going to be a good game. Unless that's the final result, in which case that's great for them. Let's see, who else do we have? Peter Bricks, I've got your question, dude, and I'm gonna get to it. Don't worry. Marcos is here as well, which is awesome. So I think I've got to the bottom here. So that's cool. So I'm going to get to the couple of questions we do have. Whilst I am dealing with these couple of questions, then please do get in your questions, and I will get to those pretty much as soon as we have. We've got about just about an hour, maybe a little bit less, maybe about 45 minutes, and I'm going to try and get through as many questions as I can. We've got 16 people here, so it's gradually adding up a little bit. If you folks know people who you think that this show would be beneficial to, then please do go grab them. Let them know this show's happening. Give them a link to it. Get them in here. It would be awesome. All right, so Peter Brooks' question: do you have any tips on creating counter melodies? Counter melodies are actually a lot easier than you think. And the secret to a good counter melody is to make sure that they are not going to overlap with your main melody and distract from your main melody, but they are going to complement it. That's the key part. So, if your melody is down, let's say your main melody is written for cello, kind of a little bit like the Game of Thrones theme is. Let's say this is your melody. So your counter melody wants to be out, away from that register and complements it. So the cello is quite a rich, well-rounded, low instrument, and it sounds very, very beautiful. Elgar has written some of the most beautiful concertos for cello, which are definitely worth checking out because they will tug at your heartstrings. Elgar knew how to get every ounce of emotion out of a melody. So if you want to learn from the master of melody writing, check out Elgar's music, in particular Edward Elgar, and check out particularly his cello concerto, because it's breathtaking, beautiful melodies. So let's say that's your melody, it's down there. So you could contrast that with a melody that kind of maybe answers it. So maybe have a call and response thing going on. So whilst you whilst you've got that going, then maybe contrast that with faster notes much higher up, and have those two things kind of going at the same time. And then you can also, you can have those two melodies running concurrently. And then you can introduce a third melody, which would kind of like be an answering phrase to your main cello melody down here. Or whatever it's going to be. And you could maybe, let's say this counter melody here that is running at the same time as your main melody. This could be, I don't know, for argument's sake, an oboe. Well, let's say, you want an answering figure played in the violin. So maybe you have your second violins or your first violins take up that melody, answer that melody with an answering figure. Maybe you have them play the same thing, but maybe upside down, or maybe playing it in reverse. Those are great ways in which you can very quickly and easily develop a counter melody, is by taking an existing melody that you've already composed, shove it up a couple of octaves, put it into a different instrument from a different part of your orchestra or your available instrumentation, and make the melody, in terms of rhythm, make it twice as fast, and maybe also make that secondary melody, I don't know, double time, and also make it reverse of your original composed melody. So maybe it plays the same melody backwards, but it plays it twice the speed. And it means that the listener has things to hang their hat on that they are familiar with. The brain is incredibly complex, and it is entirely possible for the brain to hear 3, 4, or even 5 melodies happening all at the same time. So don't think that when you're writing a piece of music, that you have to have one melody instrument and everything else is kind of underneath it. So you have one melody instrument and everything else plays chords. Because what you'll find is that that's very, two-dimensional. And it will get uninspiring and uninteresting fairly quickly. So you have to find ways in which you can keep your listener engaged. So if you do have a solo featured instrument like Elgar did for his cello concerto, then you need to be able to get some call and response happening between the soloist and the orchestra, or the soloist and the band, and get them kind of talking to each other, integrating with each other, weaving melody lines in and out of each other, responding to each other, or even just like have your main melodic statement played by your solo instrument and then have it restated in its entirety by your band or by your orchestra. And what that does is that means the listener not only hears your melodic statement again, and repetition is a good thing in music, because what repetition does is repetition reinforces. Repetition reinforces, which is why teachers use repetition all the time. It's because it reinforces something that you consider important and you want your listener to hold on to for as long as possible. So, which is why you have counter melodies. And you can have 2 or 3 or even 4 or even 5 counter melodies to your main melody. And you just toss them around your orchestration. And there's a couple of things that does. Number one, it keeps it's ear candy. It keeps the listener listening, and it gives them little kind of diversions rather than distractions from your main melody. It's like decorating the main melody. Here's the main attraction. Let's decorate it. Let's give it some icicles. Let's give it some sparkles. And that's what you're doing with counter melodies. So I hope that is something that is helpful to you, Peter. Marcos says, was thinking, tried and figured out that Windows 11 is fine with newer things. My interface with 96K runs great. I perceive difference a lot, say up to 48. Why? I don't know. I don't know what your interface is, to be honest. And I don't know what your audio software is that you're running. So there's kind of, there's too much. There's a lack of information to that question. I don't know why you're having issue with 48K. It could be that your audio interface it might not be fully 100% compatible with Windows 11 yet. There's an awful lot of companies out there that aren't ready for Windows 11. There are some that are, but there are a lot that aren't. And the same is the case for the M1, the Mac M1 chips. There are some DAW companies that are ready for it. Logic obviously is. I believe Pro Tools is now, and Cubase is now, and I think Reaper is. But there are some other softwares that they're just not M1 ready. But the biggest impact at the moment is that a lot of plugin manufacturing companies just aren't ready yet. So a lot of their plugins will not work on M1s in native mode. They'll work in Rosetta 2 mode because Rosetta 2 basically is an Intel emulator. So they will work. But on the native mode of M1s, they're just not working. So they'll either just not show up or they will completely crash your computer. So there's an awful lot of variables there, Marcos. Sorry about that. You're going to have to give us maybe a little bit more information, kind of be a little bit more concise as well. Let's see. Secret Squirrel says, good evening to everybody, which is awesome. Thomas says, Nashville, Minnesota is end of first period. Oh, so it's 3-0 at the end of the first. Okay. Could be a goal fest over there. Paul Morgan is here. Hello, Paul. Welcome. I think you're new to my show, so I'm glad you're here. When you have a strong concept of music theory, what stops you feeling every good series of chords has been done? That's a great question. That is a great question. I studied musicology and music harmony up to university postgraduate level. So, I know exactly kind of what you're talking about. There is a sense to which you might feel that, hey, every set of chord changes has been done. Surely there's only 12 major keys, 12 minor keys, and therefore there's a limit to what chord types there are that are available in those keys. Well, there's still a lot of other kind of music that you may not yet have kind of dived into in maybe a whole lot of depth. A lot of people that have spent a lot of their careers or a lot of their musical lives kind of studying the Western major minor tonal system that is derived from the music of European, white European music from the 18th and 19th centuries. A lot of people that are very immersed in that, and let's face it, a lot of popular music is very much based upon that tonal system. You'd kind of think, hey, we've kind of run out of chords, or we've run out of melody, surely. Everybody's, we're working within a set bunch of limitations here. 12 major keys, 12 minor keys. There's only a handful of different chord types. Surely we're out, aren't we? Well, I beg to differ. Because for as much as there are established, sets of chord changes like, 3-6-2-5-1, for example, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. That's kind of been, a lot of people say, hey, that's been done to death, and the same with 2-5-1. 3 blind mice. Everyone would say, hey, those particular chord changes are done to death. I mean, what about 1-6-2-5? A lot of pop songs have been written around those chord changes, and have made a lot of people a lot of money. But when it comes to it, you'd think in certainly popular music styles, there's a whole lot of music that's not really being mined in the same way. Like there's the whole Gregorian modal system. Granted, there are some pop songs that have made use of modes, like some of Björk's music, the Icelandic singer-songwriter. Some of her music is based in Locrian mode, for example. And there are some songs that are based in Mixolydian mode, but they're few and far between. There's not an awful lot of modal music in the popular music domain. You'll find some of that kind of thing happening in orchestral music, but you don't really tend to find it happening in popular music. So there might be an answer for you. Develop something out of a mode. Develop a piece of music that maybe takes popular music styles and rhythms and orchestration, but you apply it to a mode. So maybe you apply it to Locrian mode, or you apply it to Mixolydian, or Mixolydian's, a fairly common one. The Beatles have done that a few times, but, there's some obscure, modes like, build a melody out of that, build something out of that's going to explore different emotions and different colors, but is going to be based not around major and minor. Make things open harmonically instead of going 1-5 root third, which everybody does. That's classic major chord, minor chord, half diminished chord, and so on and so forth. Do something different. Make them a bit more ambiguous. Make them quartal instead. So maybe go root 6, 9, 5, for example. And maybe move this around a bit. There's a whole bunch of things you can do by taking, in this case, that's Ionian mode, C major scale. But instead of voicing things in thirds, voice things in fourths instead. You'll find that there's a whole bunch of sounds that are just not being explored just by taking a mode and building chord changes out of that. Another thing you can do if you desperately want to stay within that major minor tonal system is, instead of having chords that progress by logic and going around the circle of fifths, which is what we usually do, maybe relate your chords by a different interval. So instead of going 1, 6, 2, 5, 1, maybe do something more like this. 1, but keep that kind of major seventh kind of sound going, and maybe move it somewhere else. Maybe go 1, flat 6. And make your chords relate to each other by a different interval, just to create different sounds. Or even just say, I'm going to have my chords as their own little entity all of itself. They don't have to relate to the next chord or to the previous chord. And invent your own little rules that kind of allow for those kind of things. So you just go, I'm going to play, E major 7, E major 6, 9. And I'm just going to move this kind of thing around a bit. And just see where I land, Or just, or just try chords just because they sound nice on their own. So F minor 11. F minor 11. A13 sharp 11, and then maybe you go, that's kind of B major 7 flat 5, or you go D11 sharp 5, and you're just going for chords that just sound on their own. They sound great, but they're not related to each other. You don't have to relate chords to each other. There's no rule that says you do, unless you are, fixated upon the rules of standard Western music. So yeah, there's with those kind of opening those ideas up and not caging yourself in to, caging yourself in, there's a music theory pun there. Try some of those different concepts. Try something a bit more modal. Try something that's kind of like chord in its own entity kind of idea. Or, you can try moving chords around by major thirds or minor thirds. Just to explore a different kind of sound. All of those things are perfectly possible. You don't have to stick to what's kind of popular. So Paul, I hope that answers that question, but it's a great question. Paul carries on and says, I find even though my music theory is not that great, I keep finding everything I come up with sounds familiar. It's an old story, I guess. Yeah, we do tend to find those points where we kind of, we hit a bit of a wall. We've kind of like, I have reached maybe a limit to my understanding, and it's holding me back from being creative because everything I come up with kind of sounds the same. Well, here's the interesting thing, is that, whether you're a piano player or a guitar player, your fingers will fall to certain voicings that you're just familiar with and you're just used to doing. I do it. Every musician has done it at least once in their career. So the secret is to start to try and think about what's possible, what's different. Maybe I can extend some chords, like I was talking there about, A13 sharp 11. Maybe I've never played with extended harmony before. Maybe, the most extended my harmony is like an A6 chord, which is a derivative of the chord I just played. It's just there's a lot more tension in the 13th sharp 11 chord, because you've got the 7, you've got that tension there, and then you've got that kind of works, but you've got this tension here. So the sharp 11 doesn't technically really belong, certainly from a scale point of view, but it does belong to the dominant Lydian scale. So, whoops. So it does belong to that scale, and in fact, you could make a very interesting piece of music just out of that scale. Because that melody kind of sounds a little bit angular, because you're using the sharp 11 instead of the normal, which is kind of the normal dominant scale. It's that provides the interest and the different color. So another thing you can do is just changing up the bass notes sometimes. So, if you're if you the kind of person that likes lots of major seventh sounds, I like major sevenths. Major sevenths sound really great. That sounds great. That sounds really nice, and everything else really does. But, try changing the bass note. Make it, the third in the bass instead. Now we've got something a little bit different here. chords a different color, a different tension. You can try doing, like, take a C7 chord, but put the 7th in the bass, which, is going to naturally kind of lead to, doesn't have to though. There's lots of different things you can do with just changing the bass note of a chord. So give some of those ideas a try there, Paul. But I agree, you can get caged in. Wings Hawks, 1-0. Good grief. I thought that might be a tough one. Ken says, I like throwing in chromatic medians or using the 4 minor in a major key. Yep, I like doing that as well. Let's see, write 12 chromatic notes on a piece of paper, throw in a hat and pull out at random. Use them for chords over a melody. Yet, that is a legitimate style of composition, and it is known as aleatory music. I know that kind of sounds like I said Toy Story music, but I didn't. It's aleatory. It's a Greek word, which basically means chance music. And it was explored quite a lot, actually, in the early 20th century music period. People like Charles Ives, Aaron Copland did some of, he kind of dabbled with some chance music. Schoenberg did. Schoenberg developed the whole kind of 12 tone note row system where you take 12 tones, and the secret to this tone row is the 12 notes must not be related to each other in any way. So each note must not relate to the next note or the previous note in any way, shape, or form. So devising your 12 notes is actually quite complicated because you have to very carefully avoid any relationships, musical relationships, theoretical relationships between either the next note in the row or the previous one. And out of that little row, once you've created your note row, you then treat that like a mode. So you derive your melody from it, you derive your harmony from it. And that means you've got plenty of chance for dissonance, you've got plenty of chance for unusual colors. And again, you can kind of you can create a kind of scattergun effect orchestrationally. You don't have to follow a lot of the orchestrational conventions. Unless you kind of want to, want to employ these different techniques within a traditional or orchestrational manner, where you treat woodwinds in a certain way, brass in a certain way, and strings in a certain way, and use percussion for a coloristic effect, which is more your kind of your romantic and post-romantic way of orchestrating. But you don't have to stick to those kind of ideas. You can experiment, and but that kind of idea of chance note rows is definitely a legitimate compositional style. Deer Creek Audio is here. He says, using theory to write music will sound sterile. Use your theory to know why it sounds good or bad. Typically, only the greats will get away with math or theory directing their writing. I only partly agree with that. Yes, I see where you're coming from, that, deriving a composition out of theoretical techniques can sound sterile. For sure, it can. Doesn't have to, but it can do. I agree with you. But you said that only the greats can kind of get away with it and make something that should sound sterile sound great. I disagree with you there. And the reason why I disagree with you there is because it takes a very, very long time and a lot of hard work and a lot of practice to become great. There's the whole theory of 10,000 hours that it takes for you to master something. Well, I think you can create music using theoretical techniques that can sound gloriously emotional, and not sterile at any level compositionally, whether you're just starting out, or you've been doing it a few months, or you've been doing it a few years, or you've been doing it for 30 or 40 or 50 years. I've been writing music since I was, since I was in school, since I was, before I started high school. When I was, 6, 7 years old, I started writing music. I started coming up with my own chord changes and my own melodies. I didn't have any theoretical understanding as a 6, 7-year-old boy, but I knew what sounded right. I knew what sounded right to me, and I knew what moved my heart, and I knew what stirred me emotionally. Now, as I said, I have gone on over the decades to study composition and music theory to a postgraduate level. But at the end of the day, what governs how that works for me is, even if I'm writing something that is based out of an aleatorical 12-note system, I still want to emotionally connect with the music. And I still want to use those techniques to write something that is compelling. And you can totally do that. You can totally take that random bunch of 12 notes and create something that is emotionally compelling. And there's a number of ways you can do that. You can do that with how you orchestrate it. You can do that with how you develop your motivic ideas. Just because you're basing something out of a 12-tone note row doesn't mean it has to sound cerebral and sterile. You can make it as emotional as you want. Would be my point of view. But that's a good contribution, though, and I appreciate it. Secret Squirrel says, firstly, is there any non-assisted lyric writing VST plugin software on the market? 2, also I'm wondering if you think you may be purchasing Expressive Ease Osmos when released. I have no idea what that second thing is. Yeah, I have no idea what that second thing is. But as for lyric writing, there is something out there. I don't know whether it's still available. There's something out there called Songwriter's Pad. Jonny Geib and I did a Songwriting Simplified show on it years ago. Kind of one of our early shows, I think we did, on songwriting. I think it's called Songwriter's Pad or Songwriting Pad. That was available for this guy, the iPad, but you could get it on your computer as well. And that had like a thesaurus, a dictionary, and a chord library built into it, which was really, really great. I don't know whether it's still available, though. It's worth checking out, though. Let's see. Diggory says, people with average music theory knowledge will write average music like 251 all day long. Stravinsky will have a math formula. Only the great ears will hear, or you need to see on paper. No, disagree with you. Because I think even something that is, some music that is as dense and as complex as, this Stravinsky's Firebird Suite. It's very, very complex, but you can still engage with it on a very, very deep and emotional level. I know because I have A, performed it, B, I have conducted it, and I have sat in audiences and listened to it. I've seen the London Philharmonic Orchestra and the London Symphony Orchestra and the Vienna Symphony Orchestra perform it several times. And, the interpretations of these works are magnificent and well worth checking out. Just because you use a certain bunch of techniques and a certain bunch of tools to make music, it doesn't mean that the net result is going to be sterile just because you are using complex techniques. It's like, any master builder who builds a large architectural structure it will be complex. It will absolutely be complex, and it can be appreciated on that level, but it can also be appreciated on just simply beholding its beauty. You go take a look at some great skyscraper in New York, and you take a look at it and you go, wow, that is an awesome structure. The engineering and the architecture is just genius. I'm not an architect. I'm not going to appreciate it on an architectural level. I'm not going to know how, I'm not going to understand the load balances and how all of that is calculated. But I don't have to. I don't have to. So, for as much as I can appreciate an early Beatles song that uses 36251 or 16251 as its standard chord progression, I can appreciate that as much as I can appreciate, music by Stan Kenton for his big band, which is really dense and complex. And there's a lot more music theory that goes on with those works as there is with the Beatles. If I was to sit down with Paul McCartney and talk to him about Lydian chromatic tonality, for example, he would have no idea what I'm talking about. But if we both sat down with the same stimuli to create a piece of music, both of us could create a piece of music that both of our audiences would enjoy. I might approach the music from a more kind of chromatic harmonic approach. He might approach it from a far more diatonic approach. He might not, because, Paul has an awful lot of different musical influences. He might not be, he might not understand a whole lot of music theory, but he knows what sounds good. And sometimes what he integrates into his music is a little bit chromatic because he likes those sounds. There are some Beatles songs where there's a definite dominant 7 flat 9 in there. Those kind of things crop up in Beatles songs. A little bit of chromatic harmony here, a little bit of chromatic harmony there. They probably didn't really think too terribly much about them being flat 9 chords, but they are. I guess that's the point that I'm making. I don't really think there is any such thing as average music. I think there's music that people appreciate on a broad spectrum of points of view. I could go to town and I could totally study very deeply Schoenberg's music, or Webern, or Berlioz, or Stan Kenton, or Duke Ellington, or Billy Strayhorn, or Rodgers and Hammerstein, or the Gershwin brothers. I could go and study those on a very deep theoretical level and appreciate their music, but I could also just sit and listen. I could do both, and I think most people can. I don't really think that there is such a thing as average music. I think, even somebody that isn't particularly musical doesn't have much in the way of musical understanding. Maybe they play 2 chords on a guitar, if they're lucky, once every 10 years. But they will appreciate something by Shostakovich or Tchaikovsky. They might not completely understand the harmonic and orchestrational complexities, but they will certainly appreciate it. They will certainly receive it emotionally, and that's the whole flipping point. Whether you're writing average music with average chords, or whether you're writing something that is far more harmonically complex, the point is, these tools are all a means to an end. That's the point. whether I'm using incredibly complex chromatic harmony or whether I'm using basic, triadic diatonic harmony. Doesn't really matter. It's the means to an end, basically. They're just tools. But anyway, I think here endeth that particular discussion. Not saying you're wrong, Deer Creek. I just don't agree with you. And I'm allowed to. It's my show. But I'm not saying you're wrong, because you're not wrong. Anyway, Music to Motion says, can I send you a link in Facebook? Yes, of course you can. You don't have to ask. Okay, just send it to me. And then just let me know in the chat that you sent it to me. That way I don't forget. But yes, absolutely. Can certainly do that. Thank you, Thomas, for keeping me up to date with the scores. Sean says, I'm Mixed Paper Deity and my friend really likes it. Can I send her a copy of my mix, or is there somewhere she can buy it online? Sean, drop me an email, please, to johnny@johnnylipshamstudios.co.uk and we'll talk about that. Mika says, pretty much the same applies to math disciplines, creative cement disciplines. It's in the eye of the beholder if one loves it and one is expressing oneself. Absolutely. That's it. That is absolutely it. Nail, head. Totally agree. Whether I'm using complex tone colors and you're using primary colors doesn't really matter, so long as your audience appreciate your music and my audience appreciates my music. They enjoy it, I enjoy creating it. That's it. And you know what, sometimes I create music that's not really for people to listen to. I just create music because I like creating music and I'm not expecting people to listen to it. Sure, I'll put it out there. I'll put it up on my Bandcamp page, for example. But I'm not really expecting people to buy it. I'm not really expecting the options there. They can if they want, or they can download it for free if they want. But, I have no expectation on my audience. I'm not expecting them to always like what I do, because I don't write music to please people. I write music to please me. I write music to enjoy it for me. And if other people enjoy it, it's an entirely secondary thing, and it's a bonus. It's an extra thing. If people enjoy my work, it's great. I love it. I appreciate the fact that they enjoy it, and that encourages me to create more music. But I'm not beholden to it. Which is why I write the music that I do. If I was beholden to wanting to make a lot of money out of a very large audience, I would write completely different music. Because then I'd be writing to please a whole bunch of people. I'm not writing music to do that. I'm writing music primarily to please me because I enjoy writing the music. Chris, you might be completely different. You might want to make music that moves a lot of people, that generates a lot of traffic to your YouTube channel, or generates a lot of listeners that then maybe want to go and en masse download your songs from Bandcamp or wherever you distribute your music. And you may well be wanting to this is your income. This is your primary source of income, or as a secondary source of income. For me, that's not what it's about. And it never really has been, even though I've been a professional musician for over 30 years. For me, it's never been about the money. It's never been about, I mean, obviously, to a degree, it's about the money because I need to be able to pay my rent and I need to be able to pay my bills. But it's never fundamentally been about that for me. And it's never really fundamentally been about having an audience. I guess it's just a difference of approach and a difference of reason why I do what I do. Anyway, we got about 3 minutes to go. Peter Brooks says he wants a cello. Good. Cello is an awesome instrument. It's actually really hard to play, but it's a beautiful instrument. Music Emotion says, sometimes I make things for fun or my own mental health rather than to fit a target or sync licensing opportunity. It makes me feel good. Absolutely. Absolutely. Ken says, I think you have to write for yourself. I get that artists write for an audience, but I cannot be happy that way. If I don't love it, then what's the point? Yes, I'm kind of in agreement with you. And I guess that's why I've never really chased down, the playing to the big audiences. I mean, I've done it. I've played to huge audiences and got a kick out of it. But, when I get up on that stage, even if there are only 3 people in attendance, I'm not there for them. I'm there, first of all, for me, because I like to make music. I like to perform. I like to play my instruments. Being on a stage in front of an audience is secondary to me. So, I don't, and that way I avoid disappointment. I don't get disappointed when there's not much of a crowd. And I also don't get disappointed when not many people buy my music. Because, it's great when they do, and I love it when they do, and I encourage you to buy my music, for sure. I'm not saying, at the end of all this, now don't go and buy my music. And I'm not saying don't come back next Sunday to this show. I'm saying, this show is a different thing. This show is all about you. It's, this show is actually me serving you. Yes, I love doing it. I enjoy doing it, but it's not, this show is different. This show is not about me. It's about you. Whereas when I sit down to write a piece of music, and, all of that goes with it, that's different. That's me. That's me. And I put that out there because somebody else might like it. And if they do, great. But if they don't, that's okay too. I didn't do it for them. I did it for me. So there we go. I think I've kind of labored that point enough. Let's see. Ken says for cello solo, Tina Guo is fantastic from Cine Samples. Wait for sale. Yes, those ones are expensive, so definitely wait for sales. Good. Peter Brooks agrees. He says, I create music to move me. If it moves others, that's a bonus. Absolutely. Totally. But as I said about this show, Sunday Night Live, is for you. I do it for you guys. I do it to serve you. I do it to inspire you. I do it to help you. I do it to answer your questions. I do it to, to spur you on to greater creativity. That's why I do it. And it's fun. I enjoy doing it. As soon as I stop enjoying doing it and it becomes a chore to do Sunday Night Live, I will no longer do it. And you'll know about it because I will announce it. But whilst I'm enjoying doing it, and whilst you guys are enjoying me doing it, I'll continue doing it. If you guys get a kick out of it, and if you learn something, and if I answer a question, and if I encourage you to be better at what you do, let's keep this thing going. But, you know, as soon as it stops doing that, we'll call it a day. And, you know, we'll wrap up Sunday Night Live and we'll do something different. I don't know what we'll do, but we'll do something different. So, on that note, your wish is my command. Music to motion. You are now a moderator. All you need to do to see your name in blue with the wrench next to your name is refresh the tab for in your browser for this show, and then you should see it. And I'm just checking to see if you actually did put up the show. Yes, you did. So if you want to go to the after show over at Mike's awesome Zoom call, go and hit that link in the chat there, and that'll take you to Mike's show. I still have a full cup of tea here, so I might join you for a few minutes. But it is 1 a.m. here, so I'm not going to hang out for very long, maybe just for a few minutes. So if you want to continue the discussion over there, then that would be great. If not, enjoy your evenings, and I will see you all on Wednesday for Songwriting Simplified with Jonny Gibe over on the Home Studio Training YouTube channel, and I will see you also around the Presonus Facebook groups. For some reason, the Presonus social media team have decided to call me the Presonus community guru, which is extremely entertaining. I have my friend and colleague Houston to thank for that. Thank you, Houston, if you're watching. But otherwise, I bid you all good night. Good night. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Studio One UK Meetup is this Friday at, I think we have it at 8 p.m. There will be a link posted by the Presonus social media team on all the Presonus channels. Go check that out. And I will be posting a link as well, so either them or me will make it happen for you. I host that meetup, so if you're up for it, I'll see you then.